today with just one small step.
Good evening. Welcome to River Community Church. My name is Sam. I'm one of the pastors here. Glad to have you here with us this evening. If you're new or if you haven't been here for a while, if you're visiting after coming to our Christmas Eve service, what you need to know is that we're starting a brand new series this week. We're calling it Resolution. We're talking about resolutions, obviously, but we're talking about resolutions in a different sort of way. We'll get into that in a little bit, but we're talking about what a resolution would look like if God was a part of it, if God was leading it, if God was the focus of it, if He was leading you into this new year. So we're going to get to that in a bit. If some of you were here last weekend. For some of you, this space is brand new. You're stepping into this space for the first time, and it's totally different than it used to be. So that's kind of fun. Hope you're enjoying it. There's a few small pieces to finish up, but we're really excited about it. We have 40 more seats for people to fill up, and that's really exciting. We're thrilled about that. So that's kind of fun. If you're new here and you're enjoying that, we're glad to have you here with us in the new space. Before we get into our first week, though, of our resolution series, why don't we take a moment and pray together? Would you pray with me? Dear God, we are so grateful to be here and to worship you. It's a new year. We're in a new space. There's a whole bunch of newness going on. But one of the things that we've known, maybe that we're hearing for the first time tonight, is that your love doesn't change, that your love isn't new, it's always been there, that you still care for us, that you're still with us. And as we talk about resolutions tonight, God, I ask that you'd be with us, that you lead us, and that whatever you want to accomplish tonight, that it would be all about you, and that we leave here closer to you, wanting to follow you more with our lives. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, lose 5 pounds, right? Eat more veggies. Get that promotion, eat less sugar, go out on more dates, work out a few times each week, run a 5K, read a few more books, spend less time on Facebook, eat fewer donuts, read the Bible more, curse less, smile more, get out of debt. Any of those sound familiar? Are any of those your New Year's resolution this year? Are you excited about any of those? I feel like it's New Year's and we're packed to the brim with these things, right? They're all over the place. You hear about them. You see them in different places. You hear what one person is doing, a friend of yours, another person is saying another thing. All kinds of New Year's resolutions are flying off the handle. People are hearing about them and talking about them and trying to commit to them. It's the new year and we're packed with these. Resolution upon resolution upon resolution. They're this never-ending flow of them. Personally, I used to make them like all the time. I would love the new year because I'd love making resolutions. I made a bunch of them in my past. I've wanted to run a certain race at a certain speed. I've wanted to quit doing a certain thing. I've wanted to read like 30 books in a year and read 2. It was a pretty awesome year. But what happens is I've had this excitement about these things, and then I've totally messed them up so many times. And so not getting them and not achieving them like I thought I would, I'm finally getting old enough to the point where I'm realizing maybe it's just a good idea not to make them in the first place, and I would feel much better about myself come the following year. So maybe you're the same way. Maybe you're the same way, and these resolutions, you start to notice some things that they have in common, right? You look at these resolutions, most of them, for starters, they tend to fail, right? For a lot of people, you don't quite make it, you don't quite hit it, you don't hit the mark, and you try that first week, you get to the gym, and the gym is packed, and you're like, yeah, this is exciting, and then week 2, it's not packed, and then week 3, you join them, or you're not sure if it's packed because you didn't make it there, right? There's this failure thing to it. You don't quite live up to it. Another thing they all have in common is that normally they're about something that we want to be different about ourselves. We want this thing that we see that we wish was just a little bit better, or we wish we didn't do. Whatever it is, it's about something that we wish was different about ourselves. And all of them typically have the best of intentions. We hope with each New Year's resolution that something good is going to come out of it. We'll get to the end of the year and we'll be thrilled that we did what we did. We'll be glad that we made that change or made that commitment. Another thing they all have in common is they fill places. Like they fill the gym and they fill the health food stores and the bookstores for whatever self-help things that are out there. They fill places for like a week or two and then it kind of falls off. But you know what else they all have in common? All of these New Year's resolutions, another thing they all have in common is you. They all have you in common, and they have me in common. These resolutions, they tend to always be about ourselves, don't they? They're about us. And there's a whole industry around it. It's about making you better. The gyms, the food, the books, the best shoes, the 7 steps to the best version of yourself. All these great things. And that's all nice. That's actually really nice. It's such a good feeling to know that there's this potential in yourself sitting in there. There's nothing wrong with becoming a better version of ourselves. That there's something good there. Except tonight I want to ask a question, and I'll get to that in a minute, but except a year from now, when all of this gets to the end of 2018, and you ask yourself, when we get to 2018 and you look back on this previous year, you're going to ask yourself, what do you really have to show for it? What do you really have to show for it? For that New Year's resolution, what will you have to show for it? Maybe a few less inches, maybe a couple more novels read, maybe a little more money because you managed your budget a little bit better, or maybe not very much because you didn't quite achieve it. I have a question to ask you guys tonight. Because what if this year there really was a better question? A better question. An option so much better than that when 2018 rolls around, you could look back on this year and you could think to yourself, yeah, that year, 2017, that was the year. That was the year that things kind of shifted. I can mark that year as a year that something changed in me. I went a different direction. That was the year. I have that question that I want all of you to ask yourself tonight, a question that I think might make you squirm a bit. And that's okay. That's a good thing. Because I think it's a question that really begs to be asked. It's the question that anyone who has ever made this real or this substantial difference in the world, whether the difference is known by everybody or it's just known by God, it's the question that all of those people have wrestled with. I'm going to ask you that question tonight, but not yet. Not yet. First, I want to tell you a story. And it's a true story. It's a story that's been preserved for us for 2,500 years-ish, maybe a little longer than that. And what's great about this story is it begins as a first-hand account, as a personal account. And it just so happens to be included in the Bible. It's this personal journal we find in the Bible called Nehemiah. It's a book in the Old Testament. And a little background for you on this. Israel, modern-day Israel, as you know it, this group of people, this Jewish nation had lived in Israel. And there's King David and all this group of kings. But after a long while of this kingdom of Israel standing, and it kind of breaks up and becomes north and southern Israel, or Judah, and all these other places. But after a while, this other kingdom, Babylon, comes in and conquers it and sends everybody off. They deport everybody, basically. Leave a few behind, but mostly they send people off all across this big overarching nation, or empire, so to speak. And so everybody that's been in this Jewish nation, that's been a part of this place where this Jewish city of Jerusalem has been the holy center of everything, is suddenly dispersed. They're everywhere. And they haven't been home for a long time, a number of years. And they've been missing it and separated from it. And after this course of time, this crazy set of circumstances, you'd think that once this happened, eventually, like, the Jerusalem that was once known would just be no more, and those people would never find their way back home. But there's this crazy set of circumstances that comes about when all of this group of Jewish people are able and allowed to go back home. There's this mass of them, thousands and thousands of them, that head back to Jerusalem. They've been away for years and years, and they're heading back to Jerusalem. And you know what they find when they get there? They find ruins. They find other people who had moved into the area. They found new enemies, people that weren't so happy that these people had come back because now they had more people to deal with. They found disorder and chaos, and they found a lack of leadership. So here they are trying to figure out the places in ruins, the wall's been broken down, all kinds of stuff is happening, and they're back to Jerusalem, but they don't even know what to do with themselves because there's all these enemies around and nobody's leading. And that's where our story starts. Our story starts with a man named Nehemiah. And this is how Nehemiah starts. It's in Nehemiah 1, verses 1 and 2. It says this: "These are the memoirs of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah." I think that's how you say it. I could be wrong. In late autumn, the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was at the fortress of Susa. Hanani, one of my brothers, came to visit me with some other men who had just arrived from Judah. I asked them about the Jews who had returned there from captivity and about how things were going in Jerusalem. Now, a couple quick things to notice about this passage. First, to start off with, it's a journal. It's kind of wild, right? It starts out with I. It starts out with this personal thing, right? He says, I was at the fortress. So it's this personal account. In history circles, this is kind of a big deal because there's a difference between primary sources and secondary sources. Secondary are like your history textbooks. So you went and the really dry history textbooks that you'd read, and you'd fall asleep when you're reading them. You'd hit the book in your desk in your head because you're reading these things. At least I did. I don't know if you guys did. I read a few of those history textbooks. Those are secondhand accounts. They're summarizing everything that goes around that's going on. And then there's primary texts. These are firsthand accounts. This is what this is. This is a personal observation and journal about what is happening in that day and time. And to a historian, this is gold. This is perfect. This is great because you get to have this personal account that talks about it as if they're just recording what's going on around them. It gives it flavor. It gives it realness. You can see that it really happened. So that's why this is a big deal. And an historian is looking at the Bible and they're saying, Nehemiah, that's an awesome book because it's a first-hand account. It's a primary source. Now, the second thing to notice is Nehemiah, he cares about Jerusalem. It matters to him. We don't know if he'd even been there or lived there all of his life, but we know it matters. There's something about it. And he lives some 900 miles of travel away. Like if it's a direct line, it's 500, but the way he'd have to travel, it's 900 miles. So it's a long ways away. And he cares about it. It matters to him what happens to the city and these people. This is what he finds. This is what they respond with. It says, they said to me, things are not going well for those who return to the province of Judah. They are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down and the gates have been destroyed by fire. I don't think that was the news that Nehemiah was looking for. I think in that moment, his heart had to have sunk. And I'm wondering, as we're sitting here tonight, have any of you ever gotten news like that? Something that instantly began to tear you up inside? Something that made you sit down because you could barely stand and you sit there in shock? Something that brings out this anger and this sadness and this confusion all at the same time, and it's trying to get out, but you're just sitting there stunned because I can't believe that's reality, that's happening. The swirling of emotions, the craziness that goes on and gut-wrenching feelings. That's how Nehemiah responds. It says in verse 4, when I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. This is a big deal to him. This is as big as it gets. The city and this people that are chosen by God, that he cares for and he's a part of, it's in jeopardy. So there he sits, haunted by this. And I'm wondering, you know that question we talked about that I was going to ask you? I'm wondering if you caught it. Because we just brought it up. Here Nehemiah, he sits and he's having heard this terrible news and it broke his heart. It broke him. Here's the question tonight. What moves you? What sinks so deep down you can't help but feel it? What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? What gets you so deep that your heart aches and you just can't look away? You want to, but you can't. Have you asked yourself that question lately? A while ago? Have you ignored it? Has there been something in your life that sits in that spot and you know it, or maybe you knew it once, but it's kind of calloused over time? Yeah, that was frustrating. Yeah, I got angry about that. Yeah, I wish it was different, and I feel like I could have done something about it, but I didn't. And so I've just let it go for a while now. What breaks your heart? Nehemiah, some 900 miles of travel to Jerusalem, received this news, and it shakes him to his core. We know this because of what happens next. Verse 5, it starts out. He said, I said, "O Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of unfailing love with those who love him and obey his commands, listen to my prayer. Look down and see me praying night and day for your people Israel. I confess that we have sinned against you. Yes, even my own family and I have sinned. We have sinned terribly by not obeying the commands, decrees, and regulations that you gave us through your servant Moses." He starts out humble, right? He knows that there are reasons that they're not in Jerusalem anymore, and he's part of that. He knows there's a reason Jerusalem is in ruins, and he's part of that. And so he says, God, I know that we've messed up, and because we've messed up, there have been consequences. And then he says this, "Please remember what you told your servant Moses. If you are unfaithful to me, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands and live by them, then even if you are exiled to tens of the earth, to the ends of the earth, I will bring you back to the place I've chosen for my name to be honored. The people you rescued by your great power and strong hand are your servants. O Lord, please hear my prayer. Listen to the prayers of those of us who delight in honoring you. Please grant me success today by making the king favorable to me. Put it into his heart to be kind to me." You see, what comes next, it's actually really dramatic. Nehemiah, he works for the king. He's in the king's court. He's actually pretty high up in the king's court. And he heads off to the king to talk with him. He's going to ask for success from God, and he's going to ask for success from God to then go and speak with the king. So he goes in there, and what he's going to ask the king is that if he would permit him to go to Jerusalem to help him fix the wall, to get some defenses up. And the last line from this first chapter of Nehemiah says this. It's, "In those days, I was the king's cupbearer." Two things that you have to realize in this moment are, first and foremost, is Nehemiah is about to put his whole life in danger. He's going to talk to the king, ask a favor from the king. And in those days, you didn't ask a favor from the king asked you for a favor. So there he sits, and he's going to have that favor to ask of the king, and he's literally putting his life in danger. And then there's a second thing that we need to know about this. The last line about him being the cupbearer, that's kind of a big deal. Because cupbearers were really well trusted by the king. You basically got to eat and drink the food of the king before the king did, so that you could make sure that he wasn't going to get poisoned or something. You just looked after this cup so that you made sure the only good stuff went into it for him. So he's incredibly trusted, and he has like the cushiest, nicest job in the kingdom. He gets to hang out at the king's table all the day long, be by the king's side, be taken care of by the king. If the king's having a good day, he's having a really good day, because that is his life. And so there he sits in the cushiest job, about to give it up. Yet he makes this request of the king, right? He leaves this cushy job. Why? To lose 5 pounds? To read more books? To spend more time at the gym? Or less time reading a Facebook feed? Which is fine, good stuff. But no. Those weren't his motivation. His motivation was something had broken the guy's heart. It had crushed him. Even though it was going to be this terribly difficult journey, not to mention what was going to have to be done by the time he got there, Nehemiah, he could not sit there and let this happen. He could not sit idly by and let the city and this people that he loved, the city and people of God, fall. What if in 2017 you could feel more alive? What if you could have some fire in your belly this year, something that really motivates you and excites you? You could see something that's not right, and you could do something about it. What if you asked yourself that question? What's great about this church is that I know that so many of you already have. Looking back over 2016, there's a lot of things that have happened. I mean, a year ago, we had a financial peace university or Dave Ramsey class that was offered, and a bunch of people stepped up to help lead it because they know how much of a difference that can make in people's lives. It made an impact on them, and so they wanted to make that impact on other people's lives. So they stepped up to lead it. They saw a need, stepped up to help. There was a marriage conference over the course of the year that this one couple was super excited about helping other marriages because they knew that their marriage had needed some help, and so they stepped up, grabbed a bunch of people to help them out, and had a bunch of people come to a marriage conference for a weekend. How awesome is that? Something broke their heart, and they did something about it. And I could go on and on. There's a ton of other stuff, like stuff that happens at the food pantry and Traded Treasures, the stuff that happens at Student Life here on Wednesday nights, the leaders that come out for that, the things that happen at groups like our moms group, M&M group. That's awesome. There's people leading missions trips coming up. There's all kinds of stuff happening because people have had broken hearts and want to do something about it. Anything that's ever happened here has happened because people have seen something or they've experienced something that moved them. God made it clear to them that there was something that needed to be done about it, and so they stepped up and they did something about it. It's awesome. You don't have to be someone special for God to use you. You just have to show up. You just have to show up for the thing God's caused you to care about. If you're looking for that thing that's going to make 2017 a better year for you, a nicer, cushier year for you, or maybe just a feel-good year for you, you might want to try whatever book out there could make you a better you. And that's good. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to look back on the year, if you want to reach 2018 and look back and feel more alive and invigorated, know you were right where God wanted you, more than just some minor change to make to your life, more than just some small thing, just take a moment. Take a moment right now and imagine for just this moment, what would it be like a year from now? A year from now if just one person, just one person's life was meaningfully changed because of you. Because you let yourself care. Because you allowed God to work in you. Can you imagine that for a moment? Wouldn't that be better than reading a certain number of books or getting your finances perfectly in order? I mean, that's important. Those things are important. Don't get me wrong. Wouldn't that be amazing? And as you imagine that, maybe you're sitting here tonight and you're thinking to yourself, man, what is that thing for me? What is that one thing that I know it just breaks my heart? It makes me feel, it makes me want to do something. You know, there's stuff that you want to do to make a difference. It's just that maybe you've been sitting there for a long time and it's kind of just hardened itself over. And I get it. I totally get it. You have some days where you just want to get to the end of it. You want to get through it because it's so hard some days. But maybe there's just those days that it feels like it's been hardened and you can't really remember what used to make you feel that way. I get that. But I think there's some things that you can do about it. A lot of you know that I enjoy running, and don't worry, I'm not saying running is what you can do about it. It's not. But what you might not know is that for me, one of the reasons that I enjoy running is because it kind of gets me out of the house and on the street. Run down the streets of town, and I'm going all over the place, and when you're doing that, especially like sometimes I run after the boys go to sleep, so it's like 8, 9 at night, which is kind of fun. I really like that time of night, or like 5 in the morning or something. It's fun because it's a different part of the world that you don't always see. So you're going down the street, and you see things that you don't normally see during the middle of the day. You see people coming out of different restaurants and bars downtown. You see people kind of talking to their kids, or maybe yelling at their kids because it's just been one of those days and they're not listening. Or you see other things. You see just life happening. And then you start to notice more than just life happening. And you start to recognize this look. This look on people's faces as they leave certain buildings or houses or get out of their cars or they're just driving by. And you just recognize this look that people have some days. I've had it. But it's this look that they're looking for something and they want something to fill it up. And maybe they're trying to. Right at that moment, it's just that when they go to bed and they wake up the next morning, they wake up and it's not filled up anymore and they got to do it again. I like running because I see that more often. And it reminds me of that. And I'm slowing down enough because I've got nothing to do but think. And I see it. And it reminds me that I have access to what they're looking for. I have it. Jesus has given it to me. It's a free gift, and I have it. And so many of you have it. This freedom, this relief that you don't have to do it all on your own, this relief that you don't have to hold on to that shame. But it breaks my heart when I see it. It reminds me why I'm so grateful I get to talk about it sometimes with people. I'm reminded how hard life is, how much we struggle, how lonely we can be. But I'm reminded even more so of the gift that so many of us have accepted. The only reason I'm reminded of that, though, is because I've slowed down to consider it. I've slowed down to take a look at it. I've looked outside of myself and the changes I need to make in myself, and I've begun to see the things that people need around me. Not that I'm going to fix them, because I'm not. I can't do that. Only Jesus can do that. But I can see where there's a need. Have you been slowing down lately enough for that? To remind yourself of what breaks your heart? You don't have to run to do that, promise. It's fine. You take a walk. Maybe another thing, I don't know if this is, I think this is a big deal. I think this is something that you could do. All of us. I think all of us could do it. We could come here on the weekend more regularly. Like maybe you look at your calendar and you go like, what, half the time or 1 out of 4 or something like that. Maybe try for 3 out of 4 this year. Because there's something that happens in this building, not just that it's a special building, but at a church with people looking and following Jesus. There's something that happens in that hour that you're at a place like this, where you slow down, you're reminded of who Jesus is, you're reminded of the needs that are out there, the needs that you have, the needs that other people have. And maybe that calloused over heart softens just the tiniest bit. And you're reminded of what breaks your heart. Maybe that'd be a step you could take this year. Maybe that'd be something that you could do, a resolution that's very practical and simple to make it to church on the weekend so that you can be reminded of what breaks your heart. Maybe that could be the resolution you make this year that can make that difference. Nehemiah Nehemiah, he finished his time talking with the king, and as we get into the story, we find out that the king lets him go and he heads to Jerusalem. And that's a whole other story, and it's an amazing story. You should read it, you should look at it. It's a fantastic story to take a look at, because there's so much grit and hard work and determination and God's blessing over the whole thing. But what I'm amazed by is when I looked up how far it was from Susa, where he was, to Jerusalem, 900 miles journey, not in a car. That's a long trip. I can imagine there'd be plenty of days where it's just going to be like, man, I got to wake up for a few days in a row, a bunch of days in a row to try and get there, a month's time probably. And I was reminded by that video that came on just before I came up that there's something important that he had to remember, and that we can all remember tonight and think about as we think about what breaks our heart. All it takes is a step, and another step, and another step. We can't get from here to there in one giant step. Just take one step. Take your next step. What breaks your heart? What's the one step you need to take to start doing something about it? What would that look like for you in 2017? As you think about that, I want to invite the band to come up and get ready. But I'm going to say a prayer. I'm going to finish with a prayer, and that prayer is going to be very simple. Essentially, it's just going to be that we would be able to take that step and have the courage to take it, because sometimes it's just hard. Sometimes it's just difficult to know what that step is or what breaks our heart. So as we think about that and as we look forward to that, I'm going to pray that God would help us to remember what it is that breaks our heart, and that in addition to that, help us to know what the next step is, what the first step is. Would you guys pray with me? Dear God, thank you that you love us so much, and that love is never changing. God, as we sit here and think about what breaks our heart, we know it could be anything. We know that you have put it in us, that you have made us aware of it, and that you have made us willing and able and capable of doing something about it through you and you working through us. So we ask tonight that you would show it to us, that you would make us aware, get rid of those calloused, hardened hearts that we may have developed over the years, and help us to see it. Help us to feel it. And then as we feel it, God, help us to know what that first step is. Whatever that first step is, God, help us to take it and have the courage to do so, and then one step after the other. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.